It's make or break for Erin O'Toole today in caucus, plus we'll deconstruct a Red Tory's defense of Erin O'Toole. I'm Candice Malcolm, and this is the Candice Malcolm Show. Hi everyone, thank you so much for tuning into the Candice Malcolm Show. Today is a big day for Erin O'Toole and the Conservative Party of Canada, and we'll break that all down and explain what's going on and what is at stake. But first, if you are a fan of True North, if you like what we do here at the Candice Malcolm Show, I encourage you to stay connected with True North. Make sure that you never miss one of these videos. As you know, we're doing the Candice Malcolm Show every single day, so we don't want you to miss out. So if you're watching on YouTube right now, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to True North, and make sure that you hit that little red notification bell so that you never miss a video. If you're watching on Facebook, make sure that you like the True North page. Drop us a comment in the comment section. Let us know what you think of the show, or whether you have any other story ideas that we should be covering here on the program. And don't forget to share this video. And if you're listening to this show in podcast form, please leave us a 5-star review. It really helps us out. So whether that's on Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts, and don't forget to subscribe to the Candice Malcolm Show. So thank you so much for that. So what's happening right now in Ottawa, the Conservative caucus is meeting for its first caucus meeting since the election on September 20th, since the disappointing election. So we have all the incoming and outgoing MPs. There's 9 MPs who lost, 9 Conservative MPs who lost, plus I think 119 who got elected or re-elected. And so they're all in Ottawa, they're all in a room right now, and from what I understand, it is intense. They really are fighting for the heart and soul of the party. I went through yesterday explaining sort of an insider's take after talking to a couple of MPs explaining what was going on. So if you want to go back and get a better understanding of what happens at caucus and what's at stake, check out yesterday's episode. Today, I mean, right now we don't know what's happening because they're still in the room, they're locked up. We're going to have to wait till the meetings end to really get a better sense of what happened. But there is a lot of speculation, a lot of rumors being pushed out, a lot of journalists speaking to their sources telling them X, Y, or Z. And so we sort of have like a mixed understanding of what might be going on. So I want to highlight a couple of the interesting scoops that I did see on social media, and I will give you my reaction. So first we have Evan Solomon over at CTV. He writes this, he says, "Scooplet, today Conservative Party of Canada Senator Michael MacDougall sent a letter to Conservative caucus urging a vote for a leadership review of Erin O'Toole. Voting in favor of a review vote is not pleasant, but it is necessary. The status quo under the present circumstances is a mistake." So there is a longer story in the Globe and Mail about this. So MacDougall sent out an email, a letter to all of caucus, basically urging them to vote on the Reform Act. So as I explained in the show yesterday, there's 2 sort of separate things that happen. The first is what they call like an airing of the grievances. Everyone lines up at the microphones and just lets Erin O'Toole have a piece of their mind, lets them hear it. This is what you guys did wrong. This is what you need to do better next time. This is what my constituents are saying. This is what I'm hearing from the Conservative base, etc., etc. And that's a part of the meeting that includes both incoming and outgoing MPs. So he also has to hear from the handful of people who lost, presumably because he abandoned Conservative principles and his strategy failed. So 3 seats were lost in Alberta, a handful of seats in British Columbia, and in the 905 around Toronto as well. So that's one aspect of it. Then all the MPs who lost leave, and the remaining caucus stay, and they vote on a bunch of procedural stuff, including the Reform Act, which is something that was introduced back in 2015 by Michael Chong. Just giving there's 4 aspects of it, but the one that MacDougall is talking about is giving caucus the power to call a leadership review. So it would give caucus the power to say, we want a new leader. We don't like this guy. We want a new leader, and that would be something new. So when Evan Solomon says urging a vote for a leadership review, it's not even necessarily a vote for leadership review of Erin O'Toole. He's talking about just giving them the power to do that. But then if you read this Globe and Mail story, he does go into some detail about how he believes that Erin O'Toole is not the right man for the job. So this is a quote from the letter. It says, "The only conclusion that can be drawn from these numbers is that the leader's conscious decision to move the Conservative Party to the left has been a strategic failure, as we not only failed to make breakthrough in the GTA as promised, we actually lost seats. So MacDougall is not happy. And this is interesting too because he is a senator from Nova Scotia, not exactly considered a very conservative stronghold in the country. So if this is what a conservative out east, out in the Maritimes, thinks of Erin O'Toole, then boy, is he in trouble. So it will be interesting to watch out for that. And again, we'll keep you posted. Next scoop we saw came from David Akin over at Global News. And David Akin is an incredibly plugged in reporter. He knows a lot of people in Ottawa, and so I trust him and his sources usually. So this is what he said last night. He said, MPs are being urged to vote yes to giving themselves power to dump a leader, but I'm told that should not be interpreted as intent to use that power to dump Erin O'Toole, who seems to have enough caucus support to carry on. And that's what I've been hearing as well. David Akin goes on, though. He says this, but here's the kicker about Tuesday's Conservative caucus meeting. Erin O'Toole, an insider says, is looking to take a snap caucus vote on his leadership, a public vote. Stand up if you're with me, stand up if you're against me. We'll all be behind closed doors, but interesting. So, wow, that would be quite the power move if Erin O'Toole just invited everyone in the room and said, guys, before we go any further, I want to know exactly where you stand. That's pretty gutsy. I don't think there's any precedent for that. In fact, the MPs that I've spoken to says that he couldn't do that he wouldn't actually have any standing, that a vote like that wouldn't have any validity. But it would be like a power move just to show, basically to shame the people who are against him, and then he could probably punish them in some way. So it's almost like a Soviet-style act. I'm not discrediting David Akin. I think he probably did hear that. If Erin O'Toole actually does that, then wow, he's got gall, and I guess good for him. That's quite the power move. But again, pretty divisive way to run a party, if you ask me. Next leak we saw came from Cian Bexey, the independent reporter out in Alberta. He says this: Conservative Party insiders say that the Alberta caucus is furious with O'Toole's performance at 25% of caucus membership. Alberta meets the 20% threshold to call a leadership review. So this is technically true. If every single Alberta MP were to vote against Erin O'Toole, it would meet the numbers that he's saying are correct. However, this is just not the case. We know this because we can look at the public support that Erin O'Toole has received. Right after the election, a whole bunch of MPs came out and led their support to Erin O'Toole, including a handful of folks in Alberta, people like Garnet Jennis, Michelle Rempel, and I believe Blake Richardson. So this whole idea that every single MP in Alberta is against Erin O'Toole is just not true. That's just not the case. And my friend Lee Humphrey made that point as well. He says, I'm not really much of an insider anymore, but I've spoken to several folks who still are, and I've not heard anything like this. In fact, I'm hearing O'Toole is safer by the day. And yes, this is what I'm hearing as well, that yes, there's a handful of people that are really mad, really disappointed, want Erin O'Toole to receive the same kind of treatment that Andrew Scheer received and want him out. But that's not the majority. That's not even the plurality of caucus. Most people just don't want to rock the boat. They don't want another leadership review. They recognize that Erin O'Toole has only been in office as leader for about a year when the campaign started, a little over a year, and that he hasn't really had the opportunity to lead the party. So that's just what I'm hearing. That's definitely not my opinion, but that's what I'm hearing will happen in caucus today. Now I want to step back and show you something interesting that appeared in the Toronto Star over the weekend. Now, as you know, the Toronto Star is the worst, most left-wing newspaper in the country. They have a social justice mandate. It is written into their editorial position. They follow something called the Atkins principle. So they are an activist journalism outlet whose goal and who all of their journalism is guided to make Canada a more left-wing, progressive, woke country. And so, but for some reason, conservatives still leak stories to the Star. They still submit op-eds to the Star. They still somehow want to win over the Star's audience, which is a huge mistake. But regardless, I digress. On Saturday, they had two really interesting op-eds that appeared side by side, and it was a debate. The Saturday debate: should the Conservative Party keep Erin O'Toole as leader? And as you would expect, the people who would read and submit things to the Toronto Star. So we have two ultra-connected conservative insiders, two former senior staff members for the Harper Conservative government, who are now both consultants. So on the yes side, we have Andrew MacDougall, who is a director at Trafalgar Strategy. He was previously director of communication to former Prime Minister Stephen Harper. And on the no side, on the side saying get rid of Erin O'Toole, is Jenny Byrne, who's the CEO of Jenny Byrne Associates, a former deputy chief of staff and national campaign director to Prime Minister Stephen Harper. So like I said, senior insiders for the Conservative Party, very well known people within the Conservative movement. So I want to go through the yes side because I think it explains exactly the mindset of Red Tories and why they think that O'Toole should stay. And I'll go through a bit of Jenny Byrne's because it's pretty good. I'll just say it's pretty good. So Andrew MacDougall starts by saying, losing to the hated Justin Trudeau is a firing offense for most Conservatives. Just ask Andrew Scheer. But what should happen to a Conservative leader who fights Trudeau to a draw with the deck stacked against him and with one hand tied behind his back? Does he deserve a different fate? So he goes on to say how the deck was stacked against Erin O'Toole, mostly because Justin Trudeau spent hundreds of billions of dollars during the pandemic, kind of bribing Canadians with their own money right up until the election when he actually sent $500 out to seniors during the campaign. So yeah, most Canadians were just grateful for the help and they didn't recognize that they were being bribed. So I'll concede that point. That is right. But then he goes into the policy and he says this is for the one hand tied behind his back. O'Toole faces a scenario in which 75 to 80% of Canadians support vaccine mandates, with most of the holdouts either supporting his party or Maxime Bernier's party to the right. Lest we forget, Trudeau's government also did a solid job procuring vaccines. The reality left precious little room for O'Toole to maneuver on the biggest issue of the day. Despite these pressures, O'Toole didn't take the bait and indulge the anti-vaccination crowd, even if it might have pulled some of that support back. That showed good judgment. So right off the bat, the position is not to lead the country, not to be a politician who has convictions, who believes in their own principles, who carves their own path and crafts policy based on their core beliefs. It all comes down to polls. It all comes down to the strategy behind the percentage and which wedge issues you can run on. And this drives so many Canadians crazy. It's like everything is based on the strategy, the polling, the micro-targeting, and you don't believe what you're saying. You're not authentic. You're not putting out a position that you believe in because you think it's right for the country. You're basing it all on what pollsters tell you to say. So I guess this is Andrew MacDougall trying to say that Erin O'Toole was smart and strong, but to me when I read this, it just shows weakness and a lack of authenticity because you're just basing your policies on what the polls are telling you. And then he goes on to really make it clear. So he says how Erin O'Toole started the campaign strong, the polls reflected that, and then he kind of fell back and went flat around the time of the first debate. And this, he says, is largely on account of his inability to explain why his platform included a repeal of gun regulations put in by the Liberals. The slide could be down to O'Toole's fluffed comms on the issues, or it could be drawn from the fact that people in vote-rich urban suburban areas don't understand why anyone needs a semi-automatic weapon. Either way, an election is a hell of a time to try to explain the nuance of Canadian gun use and gun control. So here we have it. The entire idea is that during a campaign, you don't try to defend your ideas, you don't try to defend principles like the idea that there's nothing wrong with owning a gun legally, and those people aren't the ones that commit crimes by and large. But no, it's just that Trudeau picked up this wedge issue and he was correct to do it, and the Conservatives are flat-footed. And again, this is such a bad strategy. Erin O'Toole lost because he was listening to comms people like Andrew MacDougall giving this kind of advice, because the whole idea that Erin O'Toole should lose on an issue like crime is bread and butter issue for Conservatives. Erin O'Toole is supposed to be on a law and order guy. You flip this issue immediately. As soon as Justin Trudeau starts talking about guns, you say, you want to start talking about crime, Mr. Trudeau? Let's talk about your record. Let's talk about your decision to lessen sentences for dangerous criminals, violent criminals caught with illegal guns. Let's talk about Canada's revolving door prison system. Show some conviction. Talk about conservative principles. Flip the issue. Own the issue. That's what Conservatives expect. That's what we want to see. And so this whole idea coming back that, he should never have had this gun stuff in the platform to begin with. It's like, okay, we get it. This is what Red Tories believe. They don't want anything conservative in the platform. And instead of blaming Erin O'Toole for really just handling that so poorly, he goes back and says, it never should have been in the platform. And then he concludes it all by just saying, besides, running another leadership race in a pandemic would be an invitation to a civil war, and switching horses when Trudeau is trending towards the glue factory would be a mistake. It would be better for Conservatives to improve the leader they've got. So basically the reasons to keep the guy are that we don't really want to have to do this again, which is not a very compelling, not a very exciting answer. And even the people that they get to defend Erin O'Toole have to do it half-heartedly and do it based on blaming everyone around Erin O'Toole and not him, and kind of doubling down on this idea that we need to have more liberal policies in the Conservative platform. On the other side, we have Jenny Byrne. Jenny Byrne is, sure, she's a Conservative insider, but I think she's still very much a member of the base, and she understands conservatism and the principles behind it. So her piece is much, much, much more critical. So she starts off by saying, from a political perspective, the Conservative campaign was the most disappointing. CBC ran on a platform of political expediency, hoping for a win at all costs and ending up with no wins at all. The party has fewer seats and a lower share of the popular vote than it did in 2019. It is less urban and less ethnically diverse than at any point in modern history. And so she says, for that reason, O'Toole's strategy to run as a Liberal failed. She says he did run a tactically good campaign. He made the decision to run as a Liberal, not to the center, as some commenters have said. There was little contrast between the Conservatives and the Liberals. People had no distinct reason to cast their vote for the Conservatives, and I suspect many people who voted for us in the past simply didn't vote at all. The argument to keep O'Toole as leader of the party, therefore, is purely an emotional one. It is not based on facts or results. Many people speaking for O'Toole in the months leading up to the campaign said the Conservatives needed to sacrifice votes in Alberta to win in Ontario. Campaigns are not board games, and if they are, they're more like Monopoly than Risk. You can't simply move votes from one area of the country to another. You must build support on what you already have. O'Toole's carbon tax, promise to amend rather than repeal Bill C-69, the anti-pipeline bill, and constant flipping on gun control and free votes cost him the election. The most effective attack the Liberals had against O'Toole was that he would say anything to get elected. It was effective because it was true. I'm just going to keep reading from this because it's so good. Okay, she goes on to say, if the Conservative Party truly intends to provide Canadians a meaningful government in waiting, they must now have the fight that no one wants to have. The decisions on what happens next must be based on fact. The argument to stay the course can't be on the sense that we don't have the stomach for a leadership race. That's bad for the party, bad for democracy, and ultimately bad for the country. The Conservatives are a diverse coalition of Canadians from across the country. Fiscal Conservatives, Western and Democratic Reformers, Social Conservatives, Red Tories, and Libertarians are part of the coalition. There is the head and the heart of the movement. The head wants to win and chooses leaders who appeal to Canadians. The heart wants to make sure core Conservative values are adhered to and followed at the same time. Our coalition is right now being held together by the thinnest of strings, dislike for Justin Trudeau. Parts of the coalition no longer feel like they have a political home. O'Toole won the CBC leadership race by stating that he was a true blue Conservative. He said he was the only person who could win the next election and keep the coalition together. Not only was that never true, O'Toole has fractured the party for the first time since its creation. My fear is that with O'Toole at the helm, the coalition will continue to unravel. For the good of the Conservative movement and the health of the Conservative Party, we need our leader to be able to proudly take principled stance, keep our coalition together, and grow our support across the country. Conservative members need to take a hard look as to whether Erin O'Toole is the person, and do it soon. I couldn't have said it any better myself. I absolutely echo those points. And again, today is going to be a big day. We'll be back again tomorrow, and we will break down exactly what happens inside the Conservative caucus. I'm Candice Malcolm, and this is The Candice Malcolm Show.